When I was a kid, I was fascinated by big global problems. I started watching the news at a really early age, and I remember watching Dan Rather's report on the meltdown at Chernobyl. I asked my dad every question I could think of about the accident, about the Soviet Union, and whether we would be safe. And I realized that as a 5-year-old, I had a lot of questions and concerns. My dad told me that the world can be a scary place, but that we have the power to change it for the better, which was great advice for a kid growing up at the end of the Cold War. But how was I going to make a difference? How was I going to make an impact on these big global problems? For me, the answer was to become a teacher. I'm currently a professor of practice in political science at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I serve as the faculty director for the University Honors Program. For the past 15 years, through our national security program, I've helped students explore career paths in the intelligence community, diplomacy, national security, advocacy, and humanitarian work, both in the U.S. and abroad. I've had the amazing pleasure of working with people and students from across the state, the country, and around the world. But it recently dawned on me that a lot of the classes I teach are laser focused on human misery and suffering. I teach all the fun classes like causes of war and terrorism and ethnic conflict and nuclear weapons policy. The big, ugly problems. Taking on these big problems will never be easy, but I wanted to share some insights from my journey in coping with them because we live in a world where these problems can feel so big and overwhelming that for most of us, our natural reaction is just to disconnect entirely. But we can't afford to do that. We need resilient problem solvers who can take on these big challenges and have the endurance to keep working on them. One day, while I was lecturing on the brutal scale of the 1995 Rwanda genocide, a topic I've covered many times before, I froze. And despite years of teaching difficult and depressing subjects, I was having a panic attack. It was like all of those big problems that I routinely think about came crashing in on me all at once, and it just hit me like a train. I excused myself to grab a drink of water and try to pull myself together. And when I returned, the students all wanted to talk about the case in detail, which is great. But getting good participation in that morning class is a rare and precious thing, and there it was. I don't remember much else from that class other than white-knuckling it through and then collapsing in my office as soon as the door shut behind me. What was I going to do? I wanted to disconnect completely, call in sick forever, and pull the covers over my head. Eventually, the panic attack resolved itself, leaving me exhausted and with a strong desire to never experience those feelings again. I had to do something. I reached out to a therapist, I went to the doctor, and I decided to be proactive since I couldn't avoid these topics and continue to do my work. After reflecting on my panic attack with my therapist, I realized that I spend a lot of time focused on the grim, dire, and dark aspects of the world. And this isn't a normal or well-rounded view of reality, and over time, it had taken a toll. I learned that our brains spend a lot of time focused on the worst possible outcomes, and that emotions like fear and disgust are evolutionary responses that have kept our species safe from prehistoric dangers like saber-toothed tigers and cave bears and rival tribes. Well, in today's world, those ancient neurological responses still work in much the same way. When you're afraid, disgusted, or even angry, our view of the world can morph, often skewing reality. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that produce our media know this, and they know that it keeps us engaged through every pop-up ad and commercial break. Recent studies suggest that an oversaturation of this negative media is leading to a whole bunch of new mental health challenges, including things like doom scrolling, election anxiety, and headline distress disorder. And the result can be a profound sense of isolation. And that's exactly how I felt. Everything was terrible, people were awful, and I just did not want to engage anymore. And I'm guessing I'm not the only person in this room who's ever felt that way. The most important thing I did was listen to my wife. And yes, this is being recorded, so she'll have this admission forever. Elise is a juvenile court judge, and she is no stranger to difficult situations and topics. Both she and my therapist recommended meditation. And while I was anxious to start something new, I gave it a try. And I wasn't good at it the first time, or the second time, or maybe even the 17th time, but it did get better. Through meditation, therapy, and reflection, I realized that when I had my panic attack, I had completely lost my connection with my students. That connection was the most important and rewarding part of my job. It was the cornerstone of my career. And yet, I became so overwhelmed by these dire problems that I forgot about the people who were sitting right in front of me. It was like I was looking past them, watching a train wreck that I could do nothing about, and I was watching it all by myself. I recently heard some amazing advice from happiness guru Dan Harris. He said, "Never worry alone." There is no shortage of dire problems in the world. But if we're going to do anything about any of them, the first thing we need to do is unplug from the sensational wall-to-wall coverage and reach out to the people who are sitting right around us. Share your concerns and think of solutions together. Despite putting students first for my entire career, I became completely sidetracked when all I could do was latch on to news and information that I could do nothing about all by myself. And that led me back to the reason that I got into teaching in the first place, to work on these big problems. And I realized that I can't solve the problem of nuclear war all by myself, and neither can you. But I can help a student find a career path working on the deterrence mission. I can't solve the authoritarian challenges to our democracy or our institutions all by myself, but I can teach my students the value of political freedom. And I can't end the looming threat of climate change all by myself, but I can sponsor student research that could one day lead to a breakthrough. In my quest to find some sense of equanimity in dealing with these tough problems, I realized three things. The first one is there's a difference between being afraid and being informed. The second is that no one person can solve any of these problems all by themselves, no matter how hard you stare at it. And the third is that we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves and others. So if you believe that we have the power to change the world for the better, please remember that it starts by connecting to the people right in front of us first. Thank you.